What's up, guys? Hope you're having a good Saturday. Today we're going to go through every news wave that we've done so far in this week in a very quick summarized fashion. News wave week in review, as usual. And we're going to answer some of your comments and kind of have more of a conversation than just a news show like we usually do throughout the week. So let's get started. On Monday, we talked about the possibility of Rogue Squadron coming to the Switch. This all started when Julian appeared on Nintendo voice chat over at IGN and talked about his time as president of Factor 5 while also spilling the beans on the canceled Rogue Squadron game for the Wii. He mentions the Switch would be the best system to move this game over to, and that the game was pretty much finished, give or take some bug testing and minor QA work. According to Julian, it's up to EA and Disney if they want to pursue this project. Terramath says, as long as EA owns the Star Wars IP, we're never going to get this game for the Switch or any proper Star Wars game for that matter, unless they were willing to make a mobile game with the name Rogue Squadron slapped on it, where they could easily implement microtransactions and loot boxes. But considering that the Nintendo Switch is literally a tablet, they might just do it to see if they can milk it to the Nintendo Switch audience. You know, I never really thought about EA possibly taking that title and moving it to mobile platforms. It could work, to be honest, because people on mobile platforms are so used to now getting a free game and then paying microtransactions if they want, and a lot of people do, as we see with revenue reports coming out of some companies do things like Clash of Clans and Candy Crush Saga. It's an obscene amount of money. I mean, we're to the point where Candy Crush Saga has its own TV show, which is so weird to see. But yeah, it has its own TV show. And here we are now where EA is probably going to start exploring that mobile market, and honestly, I don't want to see that happen, but I could see Rogue Squadron pretty much get demoted to a mobile IP, which is so weird to think of since it was so popular. It's such a good game on the GameCube, even the Nintendo 64, although I think the GameCube is where it really took off because it showed what the GameCube could do at the time of a lot of cartoony visuals. Here's this game that looks better than pretty much any game at the time when it came to the PS2 or the original Xbox. I mean, that was it. So I hope that's not the case. I would love to see EA show up to Julian's doorstep and say, hey, let's make that game, put it on the Switch. But I know their one caveat would be, let's also figure out a way to make it a recurring revenue game where we can keep getting money from people. So things like parts for your X-Wing fighter would cost money. Again, though, it blows my mind. Cosmetics on the X-Wing fighters, on the A-Wing fighters, on all these TIE fighters, just seriously, like decals on the fighters. Those could be part of loot boxes and microtransactions. Changing the color, like these little things would make so much money and it wouldn't affect gameplay at all. And honestly, people just wouldn't care because of that. But I would like to see them get Rogue Squadron going, and I hope that is something that's at least thought of, right? It's in like the planning process, but I guess we'll have to see. I mean, we would probably see it at a big show like an E3 or something, but I wouldn't count on it right now, unfortunately. On Tuesday, we talked about the beginning of the end for EA's loot boxes. Loot box grinding and gameplay implementation had become obvious to those in the early play sessions, and reviewers were making it apparent that the game was still pay to win, despite EA saying they were trying to fix it. Super J1E2Z6, I'm sure that spells something, says, EA Games, cash in everything. I had to at least put that up here. I thought that was a good comment. That, of course, is talking about what they used to put. I don't know if they really still put it in any of their games anymore. I'm not super up to date on every one of their intros to their games, but it used to be EA Games, challenge everything, and it was kind of a whisper. It's like this.
EA Games, challenge everything.
Very clever, Super J1EZ6. Try Hard Black Guy says, kind of messed up how they hyped the free DLC for this game and doubled down on the microtransactions. You know, that's actually a good point. This is really funny because I remember when they first talked about the game and then they said, hey, we're sorry how the first one turned out. How about we actually do something prosumer for a change and give you guys all the DLC for free because we know this game is going to sell 15, 16 million copies. So they were going to make a small fortune, you know, like seriously, a king's ransom from this game. But then, of course, they quietly start talking about microtransactions and it balloons to this point. I mean, if you go back to when they first announced it to now, you would not believe how far this game has fallen. People were so excited when they first showed it off, and now people are so down on the game. It's amazing what EA managed to do in a span of just months. It blows my mind. On Wednesday, we talked about the controversial Game of the Year nomination in PlayerUnknown's Battleground. Since the game is technically not released yet and still in early access, many fans are up in arms about its participation in the Game of the Year category when it is alongside games like Zelda, Mario, and Horizon Zero Dawn, which are much more polished experiences. Matthew Name here says, I think an unfinished game deserves its own category, so should not be considered for Game of the Year. I am super excited for this year's awards, though, just to see Nintendo take all the awards. That's actually not a bad idea. I'm not sure. I don't think we had any of those, like Beta of the Year or Games on the Rise. I'm trying to think of what they would call that category. That's not a bad idea. Games that are in early access that are still working through their bugs, but the community is such a big fan of, having its own category is a great idea, because I was thinking about this, and if PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, let's say, doesn't actually release until January, there's a rumor going around that it's releasing in December. If it releases in January, does that mean it could also be nominated next year's Game Awards as well, since it technically had a release date of next year? I mean, at this point, Xenoblade should be on next year's ballot anyway because it missed the cutoff, but could something like that happen? If a game's in early access and it's just so popular and it's put up for Game of the Year, but it's not actually out, but then the release date falls in the next cutoff, could they win Game of the Year 2 times in a row? That's one of the problems a lot of people are having right now. It doesn't seem to fit the mold of the awards show. So I think that's a great idea. Maybe that's something they look into going forward there, Matthew, is if they add a category for early access games or games in beta that is just so massive in popularity, they can't ignore it. But they also can't really put it in with games that are technically finished, highly polished, and actually on store shelves. That's a great idea. Thursday, we went over the continuing buildup of the Battlefront 2 debacle, with gamers finding out that it would take over 4,500 hours or $2,100 to unlock everything in the game. The Xbox One X sales were revealed in the UK, with a strong debut from the new 4K machine outselling the PS4 Pro in its first week and matching the Nintendo Switch. Ghostgeist2 says, I'm done with third party, I'm only focusing on indie and first party, but exceptions are there. Wolfenstein 2, Doom, and Monster Hunter World. You know, I've thought about this a little bit. I wonder if people could be so put off by some of these big companies' business, really their dealings, what they're doing here, that they could be put off by some of these big AAA games that maybe start to venture into that same category of loot boxes, because I could see some loot boxes done better than others, like if they don't directly affect gameplay. Cosmetics seem to be the big thing that people are talking about now. But let's say I mean, you could almost borderline say experience boost, since that technically just lets you build up faster. It doesn't actually give you a starfighter or something just by snapping your fingers or pulling out your wallet. But still, I thought about this. What if a company as big as EA, that is as loud as EA, since everybody knows Battlefront, everyone knows Star Wars, could they possibly rub people the wrong way to the point where they don't even check out anything else when they hear the word loot box in that game? Because I have a feeling there could be some developers, because trust me, we're going towards this future. I think a lot of people are understanding this. We even heard CD Projekt Red, a company I didn't think would venture into games as a service. They're venturing into games as a service with Cyberpunk. So they're going to have the same thing going on, and I'm curious how they tackle the games as a service, because that more than likely means recurring revenue in some way, which probably means some sort of loot box system or in-game currency that can be purchased with a card. And I could see CD Projekt Red doing it better. People like Overwatch, even though that has loot box in it, but I think it's a better system since it's cosmetic. But EA could put people off so much they don't even look at anything else. So that's a curious thought. Really, it is. I'll be curious to see if that actually happens going forward, where some games just don't even get looked at, especially if it's a new IP, something like Anthem, once they hear loot box. Finally, on Friday, we went over the major backpedal from EA. After fan outcry started to boil over and day one sales in danger, EA quickly shut down all microtransactions in Battlefront 2 and released a statement apologizing to fans. It seemed Disney had something to do with the sudden turnaround after word quickly spread that executives from Disney made a call to the EA CEO, Andrew Wilson, voicing concerns around the Battlefront 2 backlash. We also went over the NPD results, with Nintendo taking the top spot for system sales in October and Middle-earth: Shadow of War taking the top spot for overall software sales. Jerry Totten says, if you think Disney doesn't carefully scrutinize every single thing done with their major IPs officially, especially how they are monetized, you're out of your mind. Jerry has a great point here. A lot of people see Battlefront and all they think about is EA, right? Whereas Disney is a major part of that. That IP is theirs, they're licensing it for EA to use, but they still have control over really the entire IP. It's up to them to kind of police EA, and they certainly did it here. They were not happy, and I think once the gambling talk started, Disney wanted no part of that, so they had to call call EA and get this pretty much squashed immediately with their build up to the movie. They cannot have any hiccup on the way there. They do not want to lose any ticket sales over something that a company that's licensed their IP is doing. So yes, you're absolutely right. They are heavily monitoring, heavily scrutinizing what EA is doing. It got out of control here and they had to do something. Nuvendil says, that CNN bit is fantastic. Hopefully this is just the start. I usually hate the sensationalism of mainstream media, but for once, I hope they smell the blood in the water and pounce. If microtransactions and all this become inextricably linked with child gambling, that could be the beginning of the end. This is where things are kind of interesting. See, a lot of people always get on mainstream media as not helping out because they are sensationalizing small things. In this case, CNN and BBC and other places are like the gamer's best friend in this case, who are really up against EA here, because trust me, this isn't the last piece that CNN's going to write or any other place. They're absolutely right here. Disney is linked to something that could be considered childhood gambling. So, of course, they're going to sensationalize it. They're going to write piece after piece after piece. They're going to reach out for comment after comment. And this could be very interesting because, yes, this could affect EA's hold on the Disney and Star Wars licensing here. Who knows? Maybe in a year or two, Disney ends that early, or maybe they're really excited to get out of it, so they pay out just to get out of that and find another company. Or maybe Disney buys their own studio and develops the games internally. That would be kind of interesting. But there's a lot that could happen here, and I think if they keep pushing, right, especially these big news outlets, they keep pushing on this, I think Disney is going to have to do something. You might be surprised if it gets even more out of hand and no one forgets about this. EA could lose the licensing, and who knows who gets it after that. But that would be something. If you wake up in the morning and you read that EA and Disney have parted ways and Disney's going to do something else with the Star Wars IP for video games, that would be something. Ladies and gentlemen, that is it for Newswave Week in Review. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure you like the video if you enjoyed it. It helps out the video, of course, with the likes and everything that you guys have been leaving on the videos. I really appreciate it. And let me know about any of the topics and everything we talked about today. Guys, check out later on tonight, 9 p.m. Eastern Time. We're going to do Spawncast. And then, of course, I will see you guys on Monday morning for more Newswave, 8 a.m. Eastern Time. I'll see you guys then.